What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Borderlands 4 build video. Today we're on Rafa. I know I've been on Amon for like a month, but we've got a Rafa build. We got the Grenazerker Rafa build for you today, and this one is a lot of fun. It utilizes a interesting interaction with the fire pot and underbarrels for bossing, and then for mobbing we're just throwing grenades, spawning grenades out of crits, throwing chucks. It's a blast. Let's get right into it. So starting in the skill tree, on our red tree we have 26 points. At the top we're gonna go with CTR for increased gun damage to buff Chuck. We're putting 5 points here. Then we're gonna put 5 points into Yurga. Whenever Rafa crits an enemy, action skill duration is restored, and then we're gonna pair that with the Instantito augment. Next we're gonna put 2 points into Maestro for increased skill damage to just buff our cannons a little bit. And then we're gonna put 3 points into El Valiente, one of Rafa's best skills in the game. Rafa deals increased damage from all sources. The fuller Rafa shields are, the greater the bonus. While they're at max capacity, double the bonus. So we get up to 30%, and then at max capacity, 60% damage dealt. Moving down into the lower left tree here, we're going to put 5 points into asymmetric warfare to buff our indirect projectiles, which are chucks, TD, or thrown things. Then we're going to put 4 points into Errant Spark to give our indirect projectiles bonus incendiary damage. Then we're going to put 1 point into Hostile Acquisition for lifesteal on our indirect projectiles. And then finally, we're going to put 1 point into Lateral Planking to give our indirect projectiles a chance to ricochet. Finally, we're going to take the Capstone Double Auto Shot. Moving into the green tree, at the top, we're putting 5 points into Handshake Deal for increased gun damage and melee damage. We mainly just want the gun damage here. We're also going to put 5 points into Expedite. While Overdrive is active, we get increased movement speed. Next, we're going to put 1 point into El Corazon. I'm definitely going to butcher a lot of these names. A portion of Rafa's max health capacity is converted into shield capacity. We only put 1 point here because we want 4 points into To the Last. Rafa gains increased gun damage and skill damage. The lower his health, the greater the bonus. There's not really any other skills in this top branch here to get us to the bottom branch that really benefits this build too much. So that's why we're just going to put To the Last, Handshake Deal, and Expedite. Next, we're going to put 5 points into Artilleria. This is in the middle branch. This gives us increased ordnance cooldown rate by 30%. Next, we're going to put our final 3 points into Booming Business. Whenever Rafa crits an enemy, he gains a chance to spawn a free grenade. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, spawn a grenade based on that. This is where we're going to be spawning a ton of grenades off of crits, and why we're pulling the Instantito augment for the build here. Now, for the gear that we're going to be utilizing in this build, the main weapon is going to be the Chuck. However, for bossing on the bosses that have a larger health pool, you actually want to have something with a really high damage underbarrel, like a spread launcher, a knife launcher, or a beam tosser. So the interesting thing about Firepot in specific is that the damage for the Torg stickies is based upon whatever gun you are currently holding. So if I threw a fire pot out here, so you see it stuck to this, those are dealing 30k damage, and that is based upon our Chuck. All right, now we're gonna switch to a knife launcher shotgun, and let's pray these stick. Okay, so now that we've got a couple stuck, if I switch to the knife launcher here, you saw it's dealing 100,000 damage. So it's actually based upon whatever weapon is equipped when you detonate the Torg stickies. So if you have a shotgun like this and then just switch to your underbarrel, the explosion damage is going to be dealt based on that. And it also goes even further into copying the element. So if I switch to my beam tosser here and throw my grenades, let's pray to God at least some of these stick. I mean, you can see I'm already dealing shock damage with it, but if I switch to my beam tosser, you saw 100k over there in shock damage. So you can actually utilize this to pair against shields that you're dealing with, whether it's shields, armor, or just flesh. This allows us to really take on any boss in the game. If you have a underbarrel or a weapon that you want with high damage that can, for example, have a good underbarrel like the beam tosser. So it's a really interesting interaction that works with Torg stickies as well as the underbarrels. Moving on to the rest of our gear here, though, we're just going with a amp triple bypass. You can use, honestly, any rep kit you want. I just like the triple bypass. For the ordnance, for bossing, Firepot, definitely you can use this for mobbing as well. You're going to be absolutely decimating mobs with this. However, I've actually found that the waterfall is really fun to use because of the fact that it just replicates itself on crits. So waterfalls are awesome for mobbing, especially if you can get one with a nuke augment, or if you have one like this with a lingering payload. You might like destroy your game's FPS because of all the orbs that are just going to be spawning, but it's super fun. It does a lot of damage. For the class mod, the Grenazerker is what you want. I actually have a pretty solid roll here with plus 40 kinetic damage on top of the plus 30 gun damage. The main skills here that are really nice to have specifically come from the blue tree, whereas with Abajo, this one's really nice for action skill cooldown rate. Whenever Rafa throws a grenade, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. And then you also have Ariba, which is a kill skill. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy, he gains ordnance cooldown rate for a duration. The green tree, we also get Synergia. Whenever Rafa deals ordnance damage, he deals increased gun and melee damage. And then we also get Confetti. Rafa's ordnance deal bonus damage in his gun's current element. This helps a lot with the underbarrel attachments, because it just gives us bonus damage on top of everything else. For the shield, I've just been running fireworks because, again, this counts as an indirect projectile, and it also just is really nice for mobbing. You could, if you wanted to, use a Watts for dinner, though. And then for the enhancement, I just have a TDOR one here with banger on it. Guns with TDOR licensed parts use 50% max loaded ammo when calculating thrown damage. This is really nice to pair with the Chuck. For the firmware here, the ideal setup would be 3 points into get thrown for increased ordnance damage, splash radius, and then grenades and TDOR thrown guns have a 50% chance to spawn a homing missile that home in on nearby enemies. 1 point into gadget ahoy for increased ordnance cooldown duration, and then 1 point into airstrike for splash radius. The splash radius part works awesome with the waterfall grenade. Now, for the specializations here, we're going 10 points into survivor, 20 points into brute, and then the rest into gadgeteer. The main ones we are taking are riddle you this, tripwire, full spectrum arsenal, and then fragmentation payload. So because the dummies don't like to work with Torg stickies, I'm going to show you how it works in a drill site, because that's just the easiest way to show off the build. So for the mobbing setup, until the boss spawns, I just run with the waterfall. However, you can use the fire pot. Still works the same, still works great. But this is how I like to do these drill sites. I like to start with the waterfall equipped, and then when the boss spawns, I throw the fire pot on. So we just throw our action skill out, and then we can just run around and throw our chucks around, and then our grenades are just going to spawn non-stop from these. Throw a couple grenades out and just run around. Ideally, you'd want to have a chuck that has homing on it so it can increase your damage dealt, as well as just work better with enemies. But you can see, like, it's just constantly spawning these grenades anytime we hit a crit on enemies. So we just keep tossing this around, running around here. Now the boss is spawned. I'm going to quickly swap over to a fire pot and start throwing fire pots over at this boss over here. And then you want to wait for your fire pots to start sticking to him before you really throw another one or switch to your knife launcher here. So it's stuck. And it's really hard with this boss specifically because the enemies on his back like to take the fire pots. But he's dead. He's not dying because I don't know why this health gate doesn't like to properly work. But he's dead. There we go. He died. Just like that. And the fire pots just absolutely nuke all enemies nearby. So it's just that easy. But yeah, the fire pot, it's awesome for bossing. The main issue I've run into with it is occasionally some bosses just don't have the Torg stickies have a mind of their own. They go wherever they feel. Not always do they go towards the boss, but when they do and you get it working, absolutely nukes bosses. So that's the end of the video. I appreciate you guys making it here. If you enjoyed the build, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a ton and I'd greatly appreciate it. If you want to come hang out with us while we test these builds, we stream over on Twitch as well as YouTube. So make sure you guys come into chat one day and say what's up. I'd appreciate it. Again, thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.